Every single day, your body replaces roughly 330 billion of its own cells.
Which is just a staggering number to even think about.
Right. I mean, you get a new stomach lining every few days. The outer layer of your skin completely turns over every single month.
Yeah. And your skeleton continuously remodels itself too.
Exactly. Meaning the bones that are, supporting you right now in your chair are physically not the same bones you had a decade ago.
You're literally a different person,
Hmm.
biologically speaking anyway.
Yeah, biologically, you are not a static object. You are this relentless, just unstoppable process of renewal.
And that actually creates a really fascinating psychological paradox, which is what we're looking at today.
Right, because we live in a universe defined by constant change. The shifting of seasons, the rise and fall of technology, even that cellular turnover in our own bodies.
But despite all of that, the human mind is stubbornly, almost aggressively resistant to change.
We crave permanence. We want things to stay exactly the same in a reality that fundamentally, refuses to stand still.
We really do. We hold on to routines that actively drain us.
Oh, absolutely. We stay in careers or even relationships that just no longer serve us, and we do it entirely because the misery we know feels somehow safer than the opportunity we don't know.
Yeah, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to look at the sources we've gathered and really figure out why we do this. Why do we fight the one universal constant?
Why?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we can understand the hidden machinery driving this resistance, we might finally figure out how to get out of our own way.
And I think the first step here is framing this resistance correctly. Our goal today is to look at the human brain without the usual self-judgment.
Which is hard to do, honestly.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
But the fear of change is a deeply embedded biological mechanism. It's not a personality defect.
Right, it's not like you just have weak willpower.
Exactly. It is a highly evolved survival strategy. It's just, well, it's playing out in an environment it wasn't really designed for.
Which brings me directly to you, listening to this deep dive right now. Have you ever found yourself completely paralyzed by a new opportunity, even when you knew, objectively, that it was good for you?
I think we all have at some point.
Right, like you get the offer for a new job, or a chance to move to a new city, or an opportunity to learn a completely unfamiliar skill. And instead of feeling excitement, you just feel this overwhelming, almost suffocating urge to hit the brakes.
Yeah, and the architecture of that paralysis, it was built on the ancestral savanna.
The savanna, right.
To understand the brain's aversion to novelty, we really have to look backward at the environment that shaped our neurology. For early humans, the unknown was rarely, a pleasant surprise.
It wasn't a surprise party, it was danger.
Right. An unfamiliar forest was a place where predators you didn't know how to track could be hiding.
Or like an unknown group of hominids was probably a hostile competition for very scarce resources.
Exactly. Even a strange plant was basically a roll of the dice with fatal poisoning. Caution was the primary survival trait.
Because the cost of a false positive back then, like thinking a shadow was a lion when it was just a shadow, was what? Just a brief spike in heart rate.
Yeah, you get a little scared and then you move on. But the cost of a false negative, thinking a lion was just a shadow.
That costs you your life.
Exactly. So the brain optimized for extreme caution. It formalized this brutal binary rule.
Familiar equals safe. Unfamiliar demands immediate avoidance.
You hit the nail on the head. For thousands of generations, the cautious, anxious individuals were the ones who survived long enough to pass on their genes.
And the bold risk takers, the ones who ate the glowing, unidentified berries, they were systematically removed from the gene pool.
Yeah, they didn't make it.
Which, by the way, this sounds like a complete teardown of the old blank slate theory.
Oh, absolutely. The idea that we're born as empty, unwritten pages ready to absorb the modern world, the sources make it clear that's just not true.
We arrive preloaded with like millions of years of archaic survival software.
Right.
But I have to challenge the real-world application of this today. I mean, I get why early humans feared a rustling bush, but changing careers or opening a new software program on your laptop or just walking into a networking event, none of that carries a risk of physical death.
No, it doesn't.
So why does a modern, non-lethal change cause our hearts to race and all this doubt to creep in? Why does our modern neurology fail so spectacularly at telling the difference between a tiger and, like, a mild social inconvenience?
Because the brain's threat detection circuitry is generalized. It's not modular.
What do you mean by generalized?
Well, when humanity evolved complex social structures, the brain didn't build an entirely new, separate system just to handle social or abstract threats.
Oh, I see. It just used the old system.
Exactly. It piggybacked those new anxieties onto the existing physical survival hardware.
Wow.
So social rejection, failure, or navigating a complex new career path, it triggers the exact same neurochemical cascade as being stalked by a predator.
The same flood of cortisol and adrenaline.
The exact same.
It's like having this wildly oversensitive industrial smoke alarm installed in a tiny apartment kitchen.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, it was designed to detect a massive factory fire, and now it's deploying the sprinklers because you left a bagel in the toaster for 30 seconds too long.
Yeah, that is the essence of evolutionary mismatch theory right there. Our biology is operating flawlessly according to its original programming. It's just, well, it's operating in the wrong millennium.
Which is actually incredibly comforting. Realizing that your fear of the modern unknown is just an inherited biological glitch rather than a personal failing, it kind of strips away the shame.
It does.
Yeah.
It allows you to observe the fear without inherently trusting it.
Right, and that biological glitch points us to the actual mechanics of how this plays out in our heads in real time.
Because it's happening constantly.
Yeah. If the brain is treating a career pivot like a literal tiger, what is happening under the hood to make that illusion so convincing?
Well, we have to move beyond just pointing at the amygdala and calling it the fear center. The deeper mechanism at play here is predictive processing.
Okay, predictive processing. Break that down for us.
In neuroscience, there's a framework suggesting the brain is fundamentally a prediction engine. Its primary job is to anticipate sensory inputs before they even happen.
Like guessing what's coming next.
Right. It constructs this complex internal model of the world to predict what you will see, hear, and feel next. And doing this drastically minimizes the metabolic energy required to process reality.
Ah, it's about energy. So if my brain successfully predicts that taking my usual route to work will be safe, and my usual coffee order will taste the same, it doesn't have to spend active energy analyzing every single detail.
Exactly. It just runs the simulation on autopilot. And autopilot is highly efficient. In a closed, predictable loop, the brain functions on minimal energy.
But when you introduce change...
That's when you introduce what neuroscientists call prediction error.
Prediction error.
Yes. The environment no longer matches the internal model. So autopilot shuts off,
Yeah.
and the brain is forced into active inference.
Meaning it has to actually pay attention?
Yes. And that requires massive amounts of raw processing power to update the model.
So the intense discomfort of a new situation, like that brain fog, the exhaustion, the sudden spike in anxiety, that isn't necessarily panic.
No, not at all. It's the physical sensation of your brain burning metabolic fuel at an unsustainable rate to map new territory.
Wow. The distress you feel is literally just your brain's accounting department screaming that you are going over budget on energy.
That is exactly what it is. It is actively demanding that you return to a familiar environment where prediction errors drop back to zero and energy could be conserved.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, and I see a dangerous loophole here.
Oh.
Yeah. If our brains are biologically mandated to conserve energy through prediction, isn't it entirely rational to stop when things get hard? Because, I mean, I hear this narrative all the time. Listen to your body. If it feels wrong, step back. So how are we supposed to know the difference between the friction of a healthy prediction error forcing us to grow and a genuine warning sign that a situation is actually toxic?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
You really have to analyze the source of the friction.
Okay, how so?
You have to ask yourself, is the distress coming from a violation of your core values and boundaries? Or is it simply coming from a lack of competence?
Lack of competence, meaning you just don't know what you're doing yet.
Right. Genuine warning signs usually involve external factors causing objective harm like toxicity, abuse, or just unsustainable physical demands.
Things that are actually hurting you.
Exactly. The discomfort of growth, on the other hand, is internal. It's the frustration of incompetence. It's the awkwardness of not knowing the rules yet.
That distinction changes everything.
It really does.
Because if the pain is just the sting of incompetence, leaning away from it guarantees we never adapt. If we obey the brain's demand to minimize prediction errors at all costs, we essentially just freeze ourselves in time.
We deny ourselves the benefits of neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, yes, let's talk about that, because this is where the hope is.
Absolutely. The discomfort of a prediction error is not a signal to retreat. It's the catalyst for the brain's most remarkable feature.
When you force the brain to engage with the unfamiliar repeatedly, it doesn't just suffer through it forever.
No, it physically remodels its own architecture to make the unfamiliar efficient.
I want to dig into the actual biology of that remodeling because the sources use great examples, like learning a new language as an adult or learning to play a new instrument.
Right? Initially, the process is just excruciating.
It is. You feel physically clumsy, your headaches, and every single sentence or chord progression requires total, exhausting focus.
And that's because, at that initial stage, the neural pathways you are trying to use are just weak, faint connections. A signal trying to travel between those neurons is uncoordinated.
But as you repeat the action,
You trigger Hebbian learning, the principle that neurons that fire together wire together.
neurons that fire together wire together. I love that.
Yeah, the brain recognizes the persistent prediction error, and it actually allocates resources to fix it permanently.
So it isn't just a metaphor when we say the brain changes, it's structural.
It is highly structural. The brain begins wrapping these frequently used neural pathways in a fatty substance called myelin.
Myelin.
Yes, and myelination acts exactly like insulation around an electrical wire. It prevents the electrical signal from leaking, and it drastically increases the speed at which the impulse travels.
Okay, instead of a generic pop psychology metaphor about like hacking a path through a jungle, let's think about this like a city's traffic grid.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So when a major bridge collapses, traffic has to detour through tiny, winding residential streets. The result is absolute gridlock, blaring horns, and immense frustration.
Right.
That's the first day of learning a new language. But if that detour becomes the permanent new route, the city planners eventually step in. They widen the roads, they synchronize the traffic lights, and eventually they build a multi-lane expressway. The traffic flows silently and effortlessly.
That is a perfect analogy.
Uh-huh.
The myelinated pathway is the multi-lane expressway.
Wow.
The conscious, grueling effort of active inference gets handed off to the basal ganglia, which turns it into an unconscious habit.
It becomes automatic.
Exactly. The profound takeaway here is that the brain will build an expressway out of whatever behavior you force it to repeat.
Which means the paralyzing discomfort you feel at the starting line of a major life change is just the traffic jam on the residential street.
Yep, it's just congestion.
It means the friction you are experiencing isn't failure. It's the sensation of the city planners arriving with the heavy machinery.
I love that. And once you accept that the initial distress is merely construction noise, you arrive at a pivotal crossroads.
What's the crossroads?
Well, every person has to navigate the tension between two competing drives: the biological mandate to protect what exists through comfort, and the conscious choice to create what does not yet exist through growth.
But those two drives seem locked in a zero-sum game. If you choose one, you betray the other.
They require a delicate equilibrium. Comfort is inherently defensive. We need the predictability of a safe home, reliable relationships, and established routines just to recover from the metabolic demands of the world.
Right, we need to recharge.
But growth is offensive. It requires deliberately stepping out of that defensive perimeter to gather new information and resources.
Because a system that only defends eventually starves, right? And a system that only explores eventually burns out.
Exactly. It's a balance.
The sources actually map this onto the broader sweep of history, which I found fascinating. Every major leap forward came from individuals who prioritized the offensive drive over the defensive one.
Scientists pushing against established dogma, explorers charting unknown waters, artists dismantling traditional mediums.
Yeah, and they didn't possess some mutant brain that lacked an amygdala or bypassed prediction errors.
No, their biology was screaming at them to retreat, just like ours does.
Their defining characteristic wasn't that they were fearless, it was just a hierarchy of values where curiosity simply outranked comfort.
They were more deeply invested in discovering the truth of the unknown than they were in preserving the safety of the known.
That is so powerful. But I want to zoom out for a second and look at how this plays out on a macro level, because it raises a really difficult question about the structures we build as a society.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, our sources point out that institutions, cultural systems, and widespread traditions frequently frame the familiar as sacred and the unfamiliar as dangerous.
Right, that's a common theme in history.
So, operating strictly on the mechanics we've just discussed, I have to ask, are some traditions essentially just societal-level defense mechanisms? Do we build rigid institutions simply as an externalized excuse to avoid the metabolic discomfort of growth?
Looking at it purely through the lens of systems theory, human institutions behave exactly like the individual human brain.
Really?
Yeah. An institution seeks to minimize its own prediction errors. It craves stability, cohesion, and continuity.
Because change costs the institution energy, too.
Exactly. By codifying the familiar into tradition and stigmatizing deviation, the institution minimizes chaos and conserves the collective energy of the group.
So a rigid tradition is basically the society-wide equivalent of staying on autopilot.
In many ways, yes, and it provides immense protective value. But, as the source texts challenge us to consider, the ultimate biological advantage of the human species isn't our ability to build static fortresses.
It's neuroplasticity.
Exactly. It's our capacity to rewire our own internal models to match a changing reality. When an institution or personal belief system violently resists updating its model, it mirrors the exact same archaic survival glitch we see in the individual.
What a jarring way to evaluate the rules we choose to live by. It suggests that the most profound act a human being can undertake isn't blind adherence to the past, but actually having the courage to intentionally update the model.
Taking all of the neurobiology into account, the evolutionary mismatch, the metabolic cost of prediction errors, the slow structural myelination of new pathways, we arrive at a fundamentally different definition of courage than the one sold by popular culture.
Because courage is not the absence of fear.
No, that is a biological impossibility for a functioning brain.
We idolize this idea of the fearless hero, but someone without a fear response wouldn't be brave, they'd just be a hazard to themselves.
Right, they wouldn't survive long. True courage is cognitive override.
Cognitive override.
It is the act of stepping into the prediction error while the fear walks right beside you. It is observing the ancient alarm systems of your own neurology firing off, acknowledging that they are just outdated software trying to keep you safe, and choosing to open the door anyway.
And that transformation doesn't require a single monumental leap of faith that shatters your entire life in one day, does it?
Not at all. In fact, it rarely happens that way.
It happens through the gradual widening of the roads. It arrives one choice, one habit, one single moment of tolerated discomfort at a time.
The most enduring changes usually begin quietly, in ordinary minds that simply decide to sit with the discomfort of questioning something that always felt certain.
That thought brings us squarely back to you, the listener. Take a hard look at your own life right now. Think about a specific change you've been actively resisting.
We all have one.
A conversation you have been avoiding. A creative project you won't let yourself start. A shift in your trajectory that just feels too complex to navigate. Ask yourself the critical question. Is the distress you feel pointing to a literal danger, or is your brain just trying to avoid the metabolic cost of a prediction error?
Is there a predator in the bushes?
Exactly. Or is your biology simply trying to protect you from becoming someone you have never been before? The doorway you are most terrified of opening might be the exact one leading to the life you've been trying to build.
You just have to be willing to endure the traffic jam of the new neural pathway.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final haunting thought drawn from the science we explored today. We established that through neuroplasticity, your brain physically reshapes its structure based on the behaviors you repeat. It myelinates the pathways you use the most.
Which is an incredibly powerful tool.
But if you constantly defer to that ancient evolutionary instinct to avoid the unfamiliar, if your primary daily habit is choosing the comfortable, predictable, low-energy path, are you actively wiring your own brain to become biologically incapable of handling the future?
When you realize that comfort is an active process of wiring the brain for fragility, the unknown suddenly looks far less threatening than staying exactly where you are.
It takes us right back to the paradox we started with. You look at your reflection and see a static, unchanging statue. But beneath the surface, your cells are shedding, dividing, and transforming in a brilliant, chaotic dance of survival.
We're built for change.
Your biology inherently understands how to change. The entire universe understands how to change. The only thing standing in the way is a piece of outdated cognitive software trying to convince you that staying frozen is the only way to survive. The universe is moving. The friction you feel is just the cost of catching up. It's time to stop fighting the current and start building new roads.